Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are peeling back the bright, shiny, and honestly often incredibly frustrating interfaces of our digital romantic lives. We spend so much time just staring at our screens, searching for a real connection, that we rarely stop to ask what the architecture behind the glass is actually doing to us. So, we're going to unpack the algorithmic commodification of desire. We're going to look at exactly how human intimacy somehow became just another highly optimized data stream. It's a question you've probably asked yourself after a really exhausting evening of swiping. Are these platforms genuinely built to help you find a meaningful partnership? Or are they actually highly engineered systems of behavioral control, basically just designed to keep you perpetually engaged? If you're feeling that dating app burnout, trust me, you are not alone, and your intuition is completely spot on. You're interacting with a very specific, carefully monetized ecosystem. All right, let's dive into Section 1, the GUI illusion and passive button pushing. So the everyday experience of dating apps relies on something we rarely question: the bloated, graphical user interface. We tend to think of swiping, tapping, and clicking as totally natural ways to communicate now, but fundamentally, these heavy interfaces are really just designed to feed us quick hits of dopamine rather than facilitate genuine human interaction. There's this incredibly visceral quote from legal scholar Eben Moglen that just hits the nail on the head. He notes that we're trading our profound, nuanced, expressive power for the absolute simplicity of pulling a colorful lever. We essentially get the chimpanzee hitting buttons. Just think about that striking imagery the next time you're mindlessly swiping at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Human beings are built for complex, messy, beautiful communication. But on a dating app, you're reduced to a repetitive, mindless physical act, literally just pushing a button to receive a randomized reward. And this creates a pretty terrifying gap between our warm, highly associative human minds and the cold, deterministic arithmetic logic unit, the calculating brain, of the machine. The machine simply cannot process our fuzzy, romantic intent. It only understands discrete, exact electrical voltages, so it forces us to adapt to its rigid logic. All of your messy, deeply human desires are basically squeezed through an unforgiving mathematical filter that cannot actually comprehend the nuance of love. Moving right along to Section 2, the octalysis engine and behavioral control. Now, what is the specific psychological engine running beneath that screen? It's absolutely not a random assortment of buttons. It is a meticulously crafted behavioral environment. To really understand how our desires are systemically manipulated, we need to look at the octalysis framework. Created by Yu-Kai Cho, this is a gamification design system used to analyze and build really powerful motivational drives. It gives us the exact vocabulary we need to decode why these apps feel so incredibly addictive. These apps rapidly activate very specific core drives in this framework to keep you locked in. First, you've got Drive 2, accomplishment, which delivers this little rush of validation every single time your match count goes up. Then there's Drive 5, social influence, that fuels our deep-seated obsession with profile rankings, likes, and how we stack up against everybody else. Next is Drive 6, scarcity, which artificially panics us into buying limited-time profile boosts so we don't miss out. But most powerfully, they leverage Drive 7, unpredictability. This is the exact same psychology that drives gambling. It's the sheer, intoxicating thrill of not knowing who is going to appear on the very next swipe. Together, these drives engineer an environment that compels constant, unending emotional stimulation. And what this creates is, effectively, a digital casino. The intermittent rewards of getting a match act exactly like a digital slot machine, generating a continuous dopamine loop. And here is the really harsh economic reality. The app monetizes your attention, not your success. Think about it. A successful relationship removes you from the platform, which directly hurts their bottom line. The whole system is fundamentally designed to keep you at the table, perpetually pulling that colorful lever. Okay, Section 3. Let's look at the paradox and psychological distance. So, what actually happens to our brains when we're exposed to this digital casino day in and day out? Imagine you open an app and you suddenly see thousands of potential matches right in your city. It triggers something psychologist Barry Schwartz calls the paradox of choice. We naturally assume that more options lead to more happiness, right? But the paradox shows that an increased freedom of choices actually results in decreased subjective well-being and heightened regret. Having an endless queue of potential partners doesn't make us happier at all. It makes us feel profoundly disconnected and deeply hesitant to actually commit to anyone. To really put this into perspective, think about that famous consumer psychology experiment involving a grocery store display of jam. When shoppers were presented with a massive display of 24 flavors of jam, they experienced high counterfactual regret. Basically, they were completely paralyzed by the thought of missing out on a better flavor, and very few actually ended up buying anything. But when they were given only 6 options, satisfaction soared, and confident choices were made. Now, apply this directly to an endless dating queue. The constant lingering thought that a slightly better, more perfect option is just one more swipe away completely ruins our satisfaction with the person sitting right in front of us. And that brings us perfectly to construal level theory. This theory explains how psychological, spatial, and social distance radically alters our perception and our decision-making. In simple terms, the further away something is from our immediate physical reality, the more abstract and less real it feels. So when you are communicating through the computer-mediated environment of a smartphone, a massive psychological distance is created between you and that other human being. They aren't quite flesh and blood to you yet. They're just abstract symbols, photos, and text on a screen. Because of that immense digital distance, notice how our priorities warp entirely. We start heavily prioritizing desirable traits. These are superficial, highly transactional, swipeable metrics like jawlines, physical attributes, or impressive job titles. At the exact same time, we almost completely ignore feasible traits. You know, the crucial things like personality, shared values, and deep long-term compatibility. We are literally forced by the interface to objectify others based on a quick visual scan, completely bypassing messy, beautiful human nuance. In a field of sociology known as ultra-realist criminology, this dynamic is described as libidinal capitalism. Now, that's a pretty heavy term, but it basically just means an economic structure where our profound biological desire for quick stimulation and recognition is hyper-commodified. It's commodified to offset the general boredom, precarity, and alienation of modern life. We aren't just looking for love on these apps anymore. We are consuming quick emotional hits just to make it through the day. Which brings us to Section 4, the immersive future of virtual reality dating. So what happens when we inevitably move beyond the flat smartphone screen? This is the VR dating escalation. We are rapidly moving from swiping on screens to stepping directly into fully immersive virtual reality spaces. First up, we get hyper-customized avatars, where we can endlessly curate and perfect our digital appearance. Then comes simulated physical proximity, making the virtual space actually feel physically real to our senses. Next are highly monetized premium virtual events. And finally, the introduction of AI-mediated relationships. This whole escalation threatens to dramatically deepen the commodification of our desires by placing us inside highly sensory, entirely commercialized digital environments. And VR dating doesn't remove the octalysis framework we talked about earlier. It totally supercharges it. It leverages Drive 1, epic meaning, through vast, immersive shared experiences. I mean, instead of swiping on a couch, you're exploring a simulated galaxy or slaying a virtual dragon together. It taps into Drive 3, empowerment of creativity, through endless, meticulous avatar design, and Drive 7, on predictability, through dynamic, ever-changing virtual worlds. These engineered experiences could become so perfectly stimulating that they might actually surpass the emotional resonance of physical offline dating. Which leads to a genuinely chilling psychological warning: perfect AI intimacy versus messy human negotiation. Look, a machine running on pure electrical resistance doesn't stub its toe. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't argue with you, and it doesn't feel grief. An AI companion can provide a perfected, totally uncomplicated simulation of intimacy. And the great danger here is that this flawless, gamified connection could easily make the difficult biological friction of human-to-human relationships feel incredibly undesirable, or honestly just way too much work. Finally, Section 5, the sovereign pilot and reclaiming our agency. So how do we actually survive this architecture that is literally designed to farm our attention? Well, we have to reclaim our agency. True human creation and true human connection fundamentally requires what philosopher Hannah Arendt calls praxis. And that simply means action and interaction in the real, physical world. It requires friction. It requires what the sources call the sweat of the brow. Meaningful relationships absolutely require the sheer physical and emotional struggle that cold, deterministic machines completely lack. You simply cannot automate genuine love. The crucial point here is that we must step into the role of the sovereign pilot. You've got to take manual, intentional control over your digital tools and your romantic intent, rather than just blindly trusting the chaotic casino of the algorithm to dictate your desires for you. Remember, your phone is just a tool. It's a deterministic brush. You have to be the one providing the overarching strategy, the explicit commands, and the human grace. I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought to ponder about your own digital sovereignty. As these platforms grow more powerful and far more immersive, you have a fundamental choice to make. Will you fiercely command the semiotic bridge, orchestrate your own messy human intent, and claim your reality? Or will you just remain a passive digital tenant, perfectly happy to act as a moral crumple zone for the machine's algorithmic casino? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems that run our world.